In Elden Ring, you'll find yourself tackling bosses and hordes of enemies most of the time. The game's combat mechanics are complex enough to keep things interesting, but should also make it easy enough to determine which tools you should bring to the battlefield. If you want to know which types of magic you should use for any situation, always maximize your damage output against every single enemy, well, this video is for you. Hey, what's up guys? My name is Foriam, and in this follow-up guide I will explain all the elemental damage types in Elden Ring. Last time I covered all physical damage, standard, strike, slash and pierce, but this time we're gonna talk about magic damage, fire, lightning and also holy, so you can get the best out of them in every single situation. So guys, let's get right to it. So, as I already said, all the damage in Elden Ring can be divided into two major categories, physical damage and elemental damage. Physical damage is pretty much everything you do with your melee weapons, also with shields, the slashes you do with your sword, but the elemental damage is basically all the magical damage that you deal with spells and incantations. You can do a fire breath, for example, or use your torch to deal fire damage. You also have a lightning grease, which you can put on your weapons to deal extra lightning damage, or for example even use arrows that deal holy damage. Of course, if you want to know more about all the physical damage types in Elden Ring, which ones are great against certain enemies, definitely make sure to check out my guide in the top right of the screen. I cover every single one of them in detail. Right now we're going to talk about all the different elemental damage types, their strengths and weaknesses pretty much against different foes. So let's first start off with magical damage. Magic damage is basically the primary damage of casters, people who like to use spells to defeat their foes in combat, let's say, with intelligence builds and also a little bit of focus, so you can continuously cast these sorceries. And these bad boys are pretty effective against armored enemies. So if you see something walking around with a lot of armor, some pretty heavy armor, magic damage is going to be very effective against it. It's also interesting to know that some melee weapons like katanas come with built-in magical damage, which means it's going to be even easier to take down these targets. The downside of magic damage is that it's pretty ineffective against magic-oriented enemies. Basically, summon it in spirit ashes or other casters, because basically if you build a lot of intelligence, this will improve your magic resistance. So definitely be careful about using magic damage against casters. It won't be super effective. Next up we have fire damage, and this can also be found on sorceries, but there are so many different ways to deal fire damage. You can use a torch, you can use magic, you can use fire arrows, let's say, and even incantations that allow you to breathe fire like a dragon. This damage type is super effective against unarmored enemies, so if they don't wear a lot of armor, you see exposed body parts, let's say, or even fleshy creatures, and even undead, they will die very quickly with this damage type. Of course, it is not going to be very good against enemies that do wear armor, and of course also the source of fire, which are the dragons, and also fire-oriented creatures like fire elementals, let's say. They really won't be intimidated by your flames. Of course, if you are on a mission to take out these particular threats, you definitely want to get your hands on some lightning damage, because this in fact is very effective against those heavily armored enemies and also dragons. So if a heavily armored guard is blocking your way, just take out some lightning arrows, gonna make it so much easier to take out these bad boys. Of course, you can also use some lightning grease. Also, if you have some serious problems with dragons, if they pretty much one-shot you, I think the lightning arrows are gonna work very well to take him out from a distance without a problem. And the funny thing is, it doesn't come with any weaknesses, so basically you can use it against every enemy in the game. It will still deal a decent amount of damage. I would think though that this is not gonna work very well against those stone imps, for example, which you can find in the catacombs. Just to be sure, I'm gonna test this particular situation and include it in the end of the video, but let's move on to the final damage type, holy damage. This is basically what you want to use against undead enemies. There are plenty of them in the Betweenlands, and it's gonna make it so much easier to use holy spells or incantations to take out those bad boys in no time. Just send them back to their graves with a shed of light, it's gonna work like a charm. And this one also doesn't come with any weaknesses, so you can use this damage type for pretty much everything in the game. But right now you're maybe wondering, what type of damage are you dealing if you're using sorceries or incantations that, for example, apply poison or rot to enemies? Well, basically this is all magical damage. All the damage dealt with sorceries and incantations, spells pretty much, is categorized as magical damage. Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, we can check out all the different elemental damage types against the enemies, on which is gonna be super effective. So let's first start off with magical damage. So right here I'm using a level 1 meteorite staff, which is a glintstone staff, generally to cast sorceries in Elden Ring. But basically I'm dealing magic damage right here and taking down enemies with armor one by one with only one spell. The knight, of course, does have a little bit more armor, but as you can see, the backstab spell which I'm using right here allows us to take it down pretty easily. On the next clip, we're standing on the Saints Bridge in Stormhill, and right here we have a Mad Pumpkinhead. These fellas have a lot of exposed flesh because they don't wear a lot of armor, so what you want to do is take him out with fire damage because you can literally set them ablaze. They are very vulnerable to it. Right here, I'm casting an incantation that literally allows me to breathe fire like a dragon and turn him to crisp in no time. Most animals also don't have any armor, so they are very vulnerable to fire. In this situation, I was using the fire breather skill on my steel wire torch, took him down in no time. Right here, I have an interesting clip where I took down some banished knights with bow and arrow. They have a lot of armor, and especially early in the game, they were a pain for me. I literally had no clue how to deal with them, but if you use lightning arrows, you can take them down super fast, because of course, metal and electricity, I'm not really sure if you want to go there. On the second banished knight, I even used charge shots, and it only took 2 arrows to take him down, which was pretty surprising. I also went to Redmane Castle to check out the lightning damage against these war machines. I think these are one of the worst enemies to deal with, but with lightning arrows they can be taken down fairly easily. Normal arrows only tickle them, but this one deals a lot of damage, so you can take him down from a distance without a problem. As promised, here's a little clip where I take out a couple of these stone imps using lightning arrows. Of course, first I went with normal arrows, afterwards with lightning arrows, but I don't really see much difference. They basically deal the same amount of damage. Personally though, I would never use a lightning Pokemon against a stone Pokemon, let's say, but hey, it works pretty well, so I guess you're good to go. I wouldn't waste my arrows on these bad boys though, just go with a blunt weapon with strike damage. Last but not least, I also used some holy arrows to take out these undead in the Altus Plateau. They have a pretty high level, so also a lot of HP, but the arrows do make it pretty easy to take them down as they are quite slow. And it's also worth mentioning that my bow doesn't have a very high level, so if it's a higher level, it's without doubt gonna take them down a lot faster. I'm not sure if these rotten birds in Caelid are also categorized as undead. I would assume so, because you can tell that these arrows also hit pretty hard on them. It only takes a couple shots and there they go. Alright fellow Tarnished, that is pretty much everything you need to know about elemental damage in Elden Ring. About the fire, the magic, lightning and also holy damage. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit that like button, helps me out big time, already very much appreciated. And of course, if you are interested in more Elden Ring, don't hesitate to subscribe as there is a lot more coming your way. It is entirely free and I'm gonna cover so much more in Elden Ring that's gonna be useful for you. Of course, if you want to know which physical damage types you should use against certain targets, make sure to check out my guide in the top right of the screen. Anyways, right now I want to wish you an awesome day. See you next time. Peace.